The pharmacy was empty when he walked in. It had not been empty 30 seconds before. There were 4 people in the store when the door opened. A woman at the cold medicine shelf who looked up, went very still, and walked out without her basket. A man at the register who set down his items and left without explanation. The teenager by the vitamins who simply stopped existing in the space. There one moment and gone the next. And the pharmacist on duty, a man named Gerald who had worked the night shift for 11 years, who came out from behind the counter, said nothing, and disappeared through the back door. The bell above the entrance was still ringing when the store was empty. All of them except her. She had not looked up. She was behind the dispensing counter in the back, head down over a prescription tray, counting tablets with a small metal spatula. She was 24 years old, and she had been working this shift for 6 hours, and she had 3 more to go, and she was focused on getting the count right, because she had gotten it wrong twice already, and the 3rd time would cost her. She did not see the other customers leave. She did not see him come in. She heard the bell. She heard footsteps, one set, unhurried, deliberate, moving toward the counter. She held up one finger without looking up. 1 second, she said. She finished the count. She wrote the number. She looked up. A man stood at the counter. He was tall, black hair, slicked back, sharp cheekbones, gray eyes that were looking at her with an expression she couldn't immediately categorize. Not impatient, not hostile, not anything she had a clean word for. He wore a dark suit jacket, black dress shirt open at the collar. His left hand rested on the counter. His right hand he was holding slightly away from his body, and even from behind the dispensing counter, she could see it was wrong. The knuckles, the angle of 2 of the fingers, the swelling that had already begun to darken the skin between them. She set down the spatula. "Sit down," she said. He looked at her. "There's a stool on your side," she said. "Sit down, and I'll look at that." She did not ask what happened. She did not ask who he was. She came around the counter and pulled on a pair of nitrile gloves and crouched slightly to look at his hand at eye level without touching it yet. What she did not know, what she had no way of knowing in that moment, was that no one had spoken to Cole Hargrove that way in a very long time. Simply, directly, without the particular quality of alertness that people carried around him like a second skin. She was not alert. She was not afraid. She was looking at his hand the way she looked at everything, with the focused attention of someone who intends to do something correctly. He sat down on the stool. She had been a pharmacist for 14 months. Before that, 2 years of training. Before that, a childhood in a house where someone was always sick, and she had learned early that the most useful thing a person could do was know what to do next. Her name was Nora Webb. She had brown eyes and blonde hair she kept in a low braid when she was working, and she wore the white coat of the pharmacy over plain dark clothes, and she had never in 14 months of night shifts encountered anything she could not manage. She was not managing this, exactly. She was simply doing the next thing. "Can you straighten them?" she said. She meant the 2 fingers. He tried. He couldn't, or not fully. "Okay," she said. 2 of them are broken, possibly 3. I can't tell without an X-ray, and I can't give you an X-ray." She stood. "I can tape them, give you something for the swelling, and tell you to go to an emergency room. Or I can tape them, and you can decide about the emergency room yourself." He looked at her. "Which do you want?" she said. "Tape them," he said. She nodded. She went back behind the counter. She came back with a roll of medical tape, 2 aluminum finger splints, an instant cold pack, and a box of ibuprofen. She set them on the counter beside his hand. She cracked the cold pack and handed it to him. "Hold that on the back of the hand. Not the fingers." He held it where she said. She began to work. She was careful and she was quick, and she did not ask him to confirm that it hurt, which it did, because she already knew it did, and asking served no purpose. She splinted the 2 worst fingers and taped them to the 3rd, and wrapped the base of his hand with enough support that the movement would be controlled without cutting circulation. She worked in silence. He watched her hands. When she was done, she stepped back and looked at it. She turned his hand slightly to check the tape. Her gloved fingers were impersonal and precise. She let go. "You need an X-ray," she said. "The taping will hold for tonight, but if one of those is badly fractured, it could heal wrong." "I know," he said. She looked at him. She pulled off her gloves and dropped them in the bin under the counter. "Ibuprofen," she said. 600 milligrams. Not more than that tonight. She put the box on the counter. "Do you need anything else?" He looked at the empty store. He looked back at her. "What happened to everyone who was in here?" he said. She looked up from the register where she was ringing up the ibuprofen. She looked at the empty store, as if she were noticing it for the first time, which she was. "I have no idea," she said. She looked back at the register. $12.40. He paid with his left hand. He picked up the ibuprofen. "Thank you," he said. She nodded. She was already turning back to the dispensing counter. He stood at the register for a moment. Then he left. Cole Hargrove sat in the back of his car and looked at the taped hand in the dim light from the street, and thought about a woman who had told him to sit down without knowing who she was telling, who had looked at his broken hand and seen a broken hand and nothing else, who had charged him $12.40 and turned back to her work before he reached the door. He told Ray to drive. He did not tell him where he had just been. Nora Webb finished her shift at 3 in the morning, walked to the bus stop 2 blocks from the pharmacy, and sat on the bench in the cold. She had a 40-minute ride home. She spent the first 10 minutes thinking about the prescription count she'd gotten wrong twice, and the last 30 thinking about nothing in particular. She did not think about the man with the broken hand. She would later find this fact almost impossible to explain. He was not a man you forgot easily. But she had 3 more counts to finish after he left, and Gerald never came back from the back room. She had to cover the entire store herself for the rest of the shift, and by the time she locked the front door at 3 o'clock, she was too tired to replay anything. She thought about him on the bus home the next night. She thought about the way the hand had looked, not the injury itself. She saw injuries regularly, but the specific pattern of it, the distribution of impact across the knuckles. She found herself running through the mechanics of it with the same clinical attention she brought to everything, and she arrived at a conclusion she set aside without examining further. She hoped he had gone to the emergency room. She was fairly sure he hadn't. She was right. Cole did not go to the emergency room. He had a doctor, private, available at any hour, who he called the following afternoon, who confirmed what Nora had told him and added a prescription for something stronger than ibuprofen, which Cole did not fill. He thought about the pharmacy for 3 days. Not constantly. Not in a way that disrupted anything. Just at the edges, in the car, in the office, in the particular silence of Thursday evenings when he was working at the restaurant and the building was quiet around him. He thought about a woman who had looked at his hand and said, "Sit down," and had meant it, not as a performance of calm, not as a strategy, but simply because sitting down was the logical next step. He could not remember the last time someone had spoken to him as if the only relevant thing about him was what was immediately in front of them. On the 4th day, he went back to the pharmacy. Not at night this time. It was evening, 7 o'clock. The pharmacy open until 9. He pushed open the door and the bell rang and he looked toward the back counter. She was there. She was explaining something to an elderly man about a medication schedule, holding the bottle and pointing at the label with one finger, speaking slowly and clearly. She had not looked up at the door. Cole took a basket from the stack near the entrance. He walked to the analgesics aisle. He spent longer than necessary choosing between 2 products that were functionally identical. When the elderly man left, she looked up. She saw him. She recognized him. She could tell by the brief pause, a single second of recalibration. Then she said, "How's the hand?" Not "How are you?" Not "I remember you." Just the relevant information. "Better," he said. Did you go to the emergency room? No. She absorbed this without comment. She had expected it. Did you have it looked at? Yes. And? 2 fractures, 1 minor, 1 less minor. She nodded. Are you following the treatment protocol? Mostly. She looked at him with the particular patience of someone who has heard mostly before. What are you skipping? The follow-up appointment. Make the appointment, she said. She said it the same way she had said sit down. Simply, without inflection, as information, rather than instruction. She looked at the basket he was holding. Do you need help finding something? Ibuprofen, he said. She looked at the basket. He had been standing in the analgesics aisle for 4 minutes. You're in the right aisle, she said. He looked at the shelf beside him. He picked up a box of ibuprofen and put it in the basket. Anything else? She said. He looked at the basket. He had come in with no intention of buying ibuprofen and no other plan, and now he was standing in a pharmacy with a basket containing 1 item that he could have purchased at any of the 12 other pharmacies between his office and this one. No, he said. He paid. He left. Nora watched him go. She turned back to the dispensing counter. She thought, briefly and without elaboration, that he was a strange man. Then she thought about the follow-up appointment she had told him to make, and whether he would make it, and she thought probably not, and she went back to work. He came back a week later. Bandages this time. He bought a box of bandages and a tube of antiseptic. He stood at the counter while she rung them up and did not offer any explanation for why he needed them, and she did not ask. She said, the hand, and he said, healing, and she said, good, and gave him his change. He came back 4 days after that for vitamin C. She looked at the vitamin C. She looked at him. She said nothing. He came back the following week for cotton swabs. That time she said, you know there are pharmacies closer to the center of the city. He said, yes. She waited. He picked up his cotton swabs. She watched him walk out the door. She found herself doing something she very rarely did, which was think about a patient outside of a clinical context. She found herself replaying the conversations, which was generous. They were barely conversations. They were transactions with the minimum viable number of words, and trying to understand what he was doing. She arrived at the obvious conclusion. She sat with the obvious conclusion for a long time, which was also unlike her. Nora Webb was not a person who had much experience being sought out. She was competent, and she was efficient, and she was kind, in the practical way of someone who expresses care through action rather than language, and none of these qualities had ever made anyone drive across the city to buy cotton swabs. She found she did not know what to do with the information. She also found, and this was the part that genuinely surprised her, that she did not mind him coming in. He was quiet. He did not take up more space than he needed. He looked at her when she spoke to him and listened in a way that felt complete, not waiting for his turn, not preparing his response, actually hearing. She had no context for who he was outside of these transactions, and she had not tried to acquire any, and she was aware that this was probably unusual. Most people would have looked him up. She had not. She told herself it was because it wasn't relevant. He was a customer. Whatever he did outside the pharmacy had nothing to do with the pharmacy. This was not the full truth, and some part of her knew it, but she was a person who believed in not pulling on threads until she was ready to deal with what unraveled, and she was not ready. He came in on a Tuesday evening in November, and she was alone in the store, and he bought nothing. He walked in. The bell rang. She looked up. He stood at the counter. "Did you make the appointment?" she said. "Yes," he said. "And?" "I went." She waited. "The minor fracture is healing correctly," he said. "The other one needs another 4 weeks. Are you following the protocol this time?" "Yes." She nodded. She looked at him. He looked at her. He had not picked up a basket. He had not moved toward any of the aisles. "Was there something you needed?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. No, he said. She held his gaze. She said, with the same evenness, she said everything. Then why are you here? It was not an accusation. It was not a test. It was simply a question. Asked the way she asked everything. Because she wanted to know the answer, and asking directly was the most efficient way to find out. Cole Hargrove had been asked many things by many people in many contexts, and he had answered precisely what he chose to answer, and no more, always, without exception. He looked at Nora Webb standing behind the dispensing counter in her white coat, with her blonde braid over one shoulder, and her brown eyes waiting with the particular patience of someone who has no agenda beyond the actual answer. I don't know, he said. It was the truest thing he had said to anyone in a long time. She absorbed it. She nodded once, slowly, the way she nodded when a patient gave her information she was filing accurately. Then she said, "Do you want a coffee?" "There's a machine in the back. It's bad, but it's hot." He looked at her. "I'm on break in 10 minutes, she said. "You can wait or not." She turned back to the dispensing counter. He waited. 10 minutes later, she came around from behind the counter with 2 paper cups and set one on the customer side and took her own to the stool she kept near the back of the counter and sat on it. He picked up the cup. The coffee was, as advertised, bad. They sat in the quiet of the empty pharmacy and drank it. "How long have you worked here?" he said. 14 months, she said. "Before that, I was at a hospital pharmacy. Before that, I was in school." He nodded. "You," she said. "Longer," he said. She accepted this without pressing it. She looked at her cup. "The man who was on shift when you came in the first time," she said. "Gerald. He called in sick the next day, and the day after." Cole said nothing. "He came back on day 3, she said. He wouldn't work the night shift anymore. He asked to be moved to days." She looked up. "That's not a question," she said. "I'm just telling you what I noticed." He looked at her steadily. "I notice things," she said. "It's the job." "What else have you noticed?" he said. She considered him. She was quiet for a moment, in a way that was not evasive, but deliberate. She was deciding how much of what she had noticed she was going to say. "You come in when the store is quiet," she said. "Never on weekends. Never when there are more than 2 or 3 customers. Whatever you buy is always something small. Nothing you couldn't get anywhere else. Nothing urgent." She paused. "You look at the door when you come in, and when you go out. You choose the seat with your back to the wall." She looked at her coffee. "The first night you came in, 4 people left before I looked up. I didn't notice at the time. I noticed afterward." Cole was quiet. "Like I said," she said, "I notice things. I don't always know what to do with them." "What do you do with these ones?" he said. She looked at him for a long moment. "I made you a bad coffee," she said. Something shifted in his expression. Not a smile. The thing that lives just before a smile in a face that has mostly stopped making them. "But you're not afraid of me," he said. It came out more direct than he had intended, which was unusual for him. He said things with exactly the weight he intended, always. She looked at him with the same steadiness she had looked at his broken hand the first night. "Should I be?" she said. He held her gaze. "Most people are," he said. "Most people left before I looked up," she said. "I didn't." She finished her coffee. "I don't think that makes me brave. I think it makes me oblivious." "You're not oblivious," he said. "No," she said. "But I had a prescription count to finish." She stood up and took his empty cup and threw both of them away. She went back behind the counter. She did not make it into a goodbye. She simply moved back to where she worked, the way a person moves when a break ends, and work begins again, and he understood that was what was happening. He stood. "Thank you," he said, "for the coffee." "It was bad," she said, without looking up. "Yes," he said. He put on his jacket. He walked to the door. At the door he stopped. "Nora," he said. She looked up. "Cole," he said. She held his gaze. She nodded once. She looked back down at her work. He left. She stood at the dispensing counter for a moment after the bell stopped ringing. She thought about what she knew about him, which was his first name and his broken hand, and the fact that 4 people had left a pharmacy when he walked into it, and the way he had said, "I don't know," with the expression of someone who was not used to not knowing things. She thought about the bad coffee she had offered him, for no practical reason she could explain. She went back to work. Cole Hargrove sat in the car and said nothing for long enough that Ray, who had been with him for 11 years and knew the difference between the kinds of silence, did not speak either. Then Cole said, "Her name is Nora Webb. Find out where she studied." Ray found out. He reported back the next morning. Nora Webb, 24, pharmacy degree from a state university upstate, minor in biochemistry, graduated in the top 8% of her class. Hospital placement for 2 years before the current position. No priors, no relevant associations, lived alone, took the night shift by choice because the differential was better. Cole read the file. He set it down. He did not look at it again. He had not asked for it to make a decision about her. He had asked for it because gathering information was what he did, automatically, about anyone who occupied his attention for more than a passing moment. It was not strategy. It was habit. He folded the file closed. He thought about a woman who offered bad coffee at the end of a 10-minute break without making it into anything. Who said I notice things the way other people said I'm sorry, or I don't want trouble? Who had looked at a man 4 people had fled from and seen someone whose hand needed taping? He went to the pharmacy again the following week. He did not buy anything. He came in at 8:45, 15 minutes before close. The store was empty. She was at the counter. She looked up, saw him, looked back down. "I'm closing in 15 minutes, she said. "I know," he said. She continued what she was doing. He stood at the counter. She worked. He watched her work. The precision of it, the economy of movement, the way she organized the dispensing tray, with the same attention she gave everything else. After 5 minutes, she said, without looking up, "You can talk if you want, or not. Either is fine." He said, "Tell me something about the job." She looked up. She looked at him as if she were deciding whether he meant it. He did mean it. She could tell. She looked back down. "Most people think pharmacists just count pills," she said. "The actual job is knowing what happens when you put 2 things together that shouldn't be together. Interactions. The chemistry of what one substance does to another, in a system that wasn't designed for either of them." She paused. "I like that part. It's precise. There's always a right answer." He looked at her. "Do you like things with right answers?" "I like knowing where I stand," she said. "Right answers help with that." He was quiet for a moment. "What do you do when there isn't one?" She looked up at him. She considered the question seriously, which he was learning was what she did with everything. No dismissal, no deflection, actual consideration. "I collect information until there is one," she said, "or I accept that there isn't, and work with what I have." He nodded. She finished the last tray. She looked at the clock. "I need to close," she said. He nodded. He picked up his jacket from the counter. He had not taken a basket. He had bought nothing. He walked to the door. "Cole," she said. He stopped. "Same time next week is fine," she said. He looked at her. She was already moving to the back to get her coat. He left. He came back the same time the following week, and the week after, and the one after that. It became a thing without either of them deciding it would. He arrived at 8:45. The store was always quiet by then. She had learned, without acknowledging it, that the last 15 minutes of her shift before close were never busy on Tuesdays, and she had stopped being surprised when she looked up at 8:45 and found him there. He asked her things, small things, about the job, about the city, about what she had studied and why. She answered directly and without performance, and asked him things in return that were equally small, and which he answered with the same economy he brought to everything. She did not ask what he did. He noticed this. He waited for it. The question that would arrive eventually, that always arrived, that required him to decide how much of the truth to give and in what form. It did not come. On the 5th Tuesday, she said, without looking up from the tray, "You don't have to buy something every time. You've been standing in the analgesics aisle for 10 minutes, choosing between products that are the same." He looked at the 2 boxes in his hands. They were the same. He put them both back on the shelf. "Thank you," he said. "It saves time," she said. He walked to the counter. He stood there while she finished the tray. "You knew from the beginning," he said. "From the second time," she said. "The ibuprofen. You said nothing. You weren't hurting anything," she said. She set down the spatula and looked up at him directly, and I didn't mind. He held her gaze. She held his back with the particular steadiness that was simply how she looked at things, not as a statement, not as a challenge, just as attention. "Why?" he said. She thought about it. She was quiet for a moment, that was genuine rather than strategic. "You're very quiet," she said. "You don't take up more space than you need. You listen." She paused. "Most people who come in here don't listen. They wait for me to stop talking, so they can tell me what they've already decided." She looked back at her tray. "You don't do that." Cole stood at the counter of a pharmacy at 8:50 on a Tuesday night and thought that he had never had a woman tell him she didn't mind his presence in the same tone she would use to discuss the weather, and that this was one of the stranger and more clarifying things that had happened to him in recent memory. "I need to tell you something," he said. She looked up. "The people who left the first night," he said. "They left because they knew who I was." She held his gaze. "I run things," he said. "Things that don't have names you'd use in a pharmacy." He paused. "The people in this city who know what I do, they don't come back after they've seen it." She was quiet for a moment. She looked at him with the same expression she had used to look at his broken hand on the first night, assessing, precise, without alarm. "Are you telling me because you think I should know?" she said. "Or because you think it will change something?" He considered this honestly. "Both," he said. She nodded. She looked down at the tray. She was quiet for long enough that he understood she was processing it, the way she processed everything, filing it accurately before responding. "I noticed the first night," she said quietly. "Not what specifically, but enough to know that Gerald didn't leave because of a fire alarm." She looked up. "I told myself it wasn't relevant. It wasn't, for the work. And then it stopped being something I was telling myself and became something I actually believed." She paused. "The person who comes in here on Tuesday nights and listens and asks me about drug interactions, that's also you." He looked at her. "I don't know what to do with the rest of it yet," she said, "but I know what to do with this." She set down the spatula. "And I don't scare easily." He said nothing. She said, "That's not bravery either. I just grew up in a house where things were always more complicated than they looked, and I learned to work with what was actually in front of me." He looked at her for a long moment. She looked back. Neither of them moved. "Nora," he said. "Cole," she said. "I'd like to come back next Tuesday," he said. She looked at him. "I know," she said. "Is that all right?" She considered him with the same honesty she brought to everything. "Yes," she said. She picked up the spatula and went back to the tray. He stood at the counter for a moment. Then he picked up his jacket. He walked to the door. He stopped. He did not say anything. He turned and looked at her one more time, at the white coat, the braid, the hands moving with their precise economy over the dispensing tray. She did not look up. He left. He came back every Tuesday. It did not change in its externals. 8:45, the empty pharmacy, the bad coffee she started making, without asking after the third week, the conversations that accumulated the way things accumulate, when two people are honest with each other about small things, long enough that the big ones have nowhere left to hide. She told him about her family, about the house where someone was always sick and she had learned to be useful, because being useful was the only kind of love she had known how to give for a long time. He listened without comment and without pity, and she found that she preferred that above any other response she could have imagined. He told her things in return, not about the work, not yet, but about his father, about the restaurant, about 9 years of Thursday evenings in an office that had been someone else's first, and sitting at a desk that was the right size for a man who had been larger in every way that mattered. She listened in the way she listened to everything, fully, accurately, without offering him a version of his own story back. On a Tuesday in January, she said, without looking up from the tray, "I looked you up." He went still. "Last week," she said. "I told myself I wasn't going to, and then I did." She set down the spatula. She looked up at him. "I wanted to tell you that I did it. I didn't want to know something about you that you didn't know I knew." He looked at her. "I read 2 articles," she said. I stopped. She paused. Not because I was scared, because I realized I was trying to solve a problem that didn't need solving. "I know who you are on Tuesday nights. The rest of it," she looked at him steadily, "I'll learn what I need to learn, in the right order." Cole stood at the counter of his pharmacy at 8:50 on a Tuesday in January and understood that a woman who collected information until there was a right answer had decided, deliberately, and with full awareness of what she was deciding, that the right answer in this case was not the one you found in articles. "It was the one you found on Tuesday nights," he said. "Thank you for telling me." She nodded. She picked up the spatula. She looked up once more. "Next week," she said. It was not a question. "Next week," he said. He put on his jacket and left, and stood on the pavement outside in the January cold, and looked at the lit window of the pharmacy for a moment, the warm light inside, her shape moving behind the counter, and felt something he had stopped expecting to feel. He walked to the car. He did not tell Ray what he was thinking. He did not need to. Ray had been with him 11 years and understood the difference between all the kinds of silence and had never once asked about any of them. He came back the next Tuesday, and all the Tuesdays after that. The pharmacy became, over the months that followed, a different kind of place to him than it had been to anyone else who walked into it. To the people who left when he entered, it was a warning sign, a reminder that the city contained forces that did not stop for pleasantries. To Nora, it was where she worked, and where she was useful, and where she gave bad coffee to a man on Tuesday nights, and asked him real questions, and received real answers, and trusted that the rest would come in the right order. She was right about the order. It came slowly, the way things come when neither person is performing. She learned about the network of obligations and decisions and consequences that his work consisted of, not in a single conversation, but in the accumulation of them. A detail here, a reference there, the specific gravity of certain silences. She filed each one accurately, without drama, without using any of it to replace the person she had met on the first night. He was still that person. He was also the other one. She held both without choosing between them, which was, he thought, the most precise thing anyone had ever done for him. On a Tuesday in March, she was making the coffee when she said, without turning around, "Do you know when you decided about coming back the second time?" He thought about it. "The 4th day," he said. She turned and handed him the cup. "What happened on the 4th day?" "Nothing," he said. "That was the point." She looked at him. "I spent 4 days thinking about a woman who had looked at my hand and seen a hand," he said. "Not what it implied, not who was attached to it. Just a hand that needed to be taped." He looked at the cup. "I couldn't remember the last time someone had done that." She was quiet for a moment. "I do it every night," she said. "For everyone who comes in." "I know," he said. "That's why it mattered." She looked at him for a long time with the same direct attention she had brought to every interaction since the first one. Then she said, "I knew when I made the first coffee that something had changed." He looked at her. "I don't do things without a reason," she said. "I made you a bad coffee in a closed pharmacy on a Tuesday night, and I told myself it was just the break, but I knew." She picked up her cup. I just wasn't ready to deal with it yet. He said, "Are you ready now?" She looked at him steadily. "I think so," she said. "Are you?" Cole Hargrove, who did not answer questions he wasn't ready to answer, who did not say things he hadn't weighed completely, who had spent 11 years in a world where every word carried consequence and had learned to treat his own with corresponding precision, looked at Nora Webb in her white coat with her bad coffee and said, without hesitation, "Yes." She nodded. She drank her coffee. He drank his. Outside the pharmacy window, the city moved through its ordinary Tuesday night, indifferent to the particular thing that had quietly and without drama completed itself inside. She locked the door at 9 o'clock. He walked out with her into the January cold. They stood on the pavement for a moment. "The bus," she said. "I have a car," he said. It was not an offer exactly. It was information, placed where she could use it or not. She looked at him. She looked at the street. She said, "Okay." They walked to the car. She was home in 12 minutes instead of 40. She did not comment on the difference. He did not point it out. He rolled down the window as she was going in. "Tuesday," he said. "Tuesday," she said. She went inside. He looked at the building for a moment. Then he told Ray to drive. "Now, a question for you." Nora knew almost nothing about Cole when she decided he could stay. She knew a broken hand and bad coffee and 8:45 on Tuesdays. She knew the way he listened. She knew that 4 people had left a room when he walked into it and that she had not. She decided that was enough to work with. Is it possible to fall in love with someone before you know who they really are? Or is it possible that what you fall in love with first, before the context, before the history, before all the things that explain a person, is actually the most real part of them? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. If this story stayed with you, there are more. Subscribe. I will see you in the next one.